Welcome to this demonstration of the Quest Irwin Data Intelligence Suite. Sandhill Consultants is a value-added reseller for the Quest Irwin product set. In addition to software sales, Sandhill provides training and consulting services for data governance, data modeling, and metadata management. Before we get started, I'd like to take a minute to talk about data governance as it relates to data cataloging software. Data catalogs provide the technology to administer data governance, but do not actually contain the information needed to govern what is captured and managed by the cataloging software. A significant effort goes into developing the roles, policies, procedures, and other artifacts that enable governance over the data elements. As part of Sandhill's data governance consultancy, we offer a jumpstart to launching a data governance program that we call Compass. Compass provides a framework for guidance, fundamental data governance policies, roles and accountabilities, and other data governance requirements, all delivered in a cloud implementation for easy deployment. The provided data governance content shortens the time it takes to standing up a data governance program. So now let's take a look at the Data Intelligence Suite. The Data Intelligence Suite contains a set of modules designed to work together to provide an automated, metadata-driven approach to supporting enterprise data governance, as well as data preparation, data management, and data literacy. We will look at metadata as it applies to collecting, classifying, and organizing. We'll also explore metadata mapping and lineage. From the perspective of data governance, we'll look at roles and responsibilities as well as privacy. So now let's look at the topics we'll be discussing in the demonstration. During this demonstration, I'll be addressing how each topical area relates to the functionality within the Data Intelligence Suite. So let's get started with the first topic. Good data management requires us to collect data, assess its quality, and understand its journey as it moves through the various systems within the enterprise. So let's first start by looking at how we can collect data through data connectors. In order to catalog metadata, you need to be able to connect to the sources to retrieve it. Irwin Data Intelligence Suite has two methods of collecting metadata: standard metadata collectors and smart data connectors. Standard connectors are part of the suite and allow you to connect to databases, files, and data structures like JSON and XML. Smart data connectors are additional data connectors that are purchased separately. Smart connectors can reverse and forward engineer data in motion, as well as various processes like ETL and analytics applications. Smart connectors can be customized to access and retrieve data from almost any data source that has an API. In addition, Irwin builds and maintains all of its connectors. So Irwin does not rely on any third-party vendors to supply connectivity. So now let's take a look at an example of some of the out-of-the-box data connectors. This is the Metadata Manager module of the Data Intelligence Suite. It manages the data dictionary for your metadata assets. In order to populate the metadata catalog, you'll need to gather metadata from a variety of sources. If you need to connect to a database like SQL Server or Oracle or some other database management system, you can use your JDBC driver with the appropriate data connector to examine the metadata. File-based sources like CSV and Excel are also very popular sources for metadata, as well as data modeling tools like Irwin. Here's a partial list of data connectors provided out of the box at no additional cost. Let's look at some of the smart data connectors. What we're looking at here is the Automation Framework module. It contains a list of smart data connectors installed in the Data Intelligence Suite. As I mentioned before, smart data connectors can collect data from data movement processes, data profiling tools, big data databases, cloud databases, and any other sources and targets. The connectors can be automated through job scheduling and other customizations like performing data operations on the fly. The area marked in blue identifies reverse engineering of ETL from multiple different vendors. So if you have a mixed environment of different ETL tools from various vendors, the Data Intelligence Suite will help you centralize all these disparate sources. So now let's take a look at the results from running a smart connector on an ETL job. The Mapping Manager module here displays and manages data mappings retrieved through smart connectors, as well as creating your own mapping designs with the metadata captured in the Metadata Manager. The Mapping Manager displays the source extract SQL in the bottom window and displays the graphical diagram in the window above. The green tables represent the sources, the blue tables represent intermediate transformations, and the orange table represents the target. This is one method that you can use to document Lineage with transformations using the Data Intelligence Suite. Now let's take a look at some other methods. One important aspect of data management is to know where information comes from and where it goes to. Lineage can be visualized at different levels of abstraction and within different contexts. So another question is, what happens when change is enacted? Impact analysis assists with the understanding that the impact of change may affect other things upstream or downstream of it. Lastly, we need to ask the question, why is data moving? What does that data element mean? And what are the policies that govern its use? So let's start with the first one, which is Lineage. So what we're looking at here in the Data Intelligence Suite is the system level. A system is a logical representation of data sources and targets. So for example, you could have a CRM system that contains information about sales and marketing. In this example, there are 3 source systems feeding a data warehouse and then a reporting system. This is the highest level of abstraction for Lineage. Now let's go down to the next level. The next level is what's called an environment. An environment is a further subclassification for data sources and targets. On the left, you can see the customer loan staging area within the data warehouse. Notice that the lineage can be displayed forward, reverse, or both. Now let's drill down to the table level. Here at the table level, you can see the source tables feeding into the staging table and then onto the various data warehousing tables. Now let's drill down into the column level for more details. Here we can see the fields that populate the staging table. Note there are 3 different columns populating the staging column. Now let's take a look at impact analysis. After mapping source metadata with target metadata, you can run an impact analysis on the technical assets. The impact analysis helps you understand the upstream and the downstream dependencies of the technical assets. It helps you assess the impact of transformations on source and target level data elements. The lineage visualization we have seen thus far will tell us where data comes from. It'll also tell us where it goes and how it changed along the way. But it does not answer the question of what does it mean, or why does it exist, or what are the rules that govern it. So next we're going to take a look at answering those questions by using a mind map. Fundamentally, the data catalog serves as a bridge between what does it mean and where does it come from. More importantly, what are the rules that govern it? This diagram visualizes the connection between two different parts. The left side represents the technology perspective, where data is stored and collected, and the right side represents the business perspective, which is what does it mean and what are the rules that govern it. The legend indicates the meaning of the colors. The black rectangle in the middle represents the data element being analyzed. You'll also notice that there are red padlocks on various elements. That indicates that this data element or system has been flagged as being sensitive. We'll examine this more closely at a later time in the demonstration. But one of the things that you'll want to note is the purple area represents the tags. So you can develop any tagging system you'd like for the metadata. The blue dot represents the business term. So when we look at the business term as it relates to address, you can see that the business term breaks down into people and organizations as well as logistics. So under people and organizations, an address is a kind of party communication. So that be contact communications, party postal addresses, but also an electronic address. So one of the interesting things here is that address could have two meanings. It could have a meaning of a physical address on the planet, or it could be an electronic address somewhere on the internet. Below is logistics, which breaks down into facilities and locations. Facilities and locations being a postal address for a organization, let's say. There's also this concept of a ship-to purchaser and a ship-to customer. So a lot of the things that we want to understand about an address, we can actually map and track here in the Data Intelligence Suite. Below that, the area in red, these are the data governance policies. So there's a data access policy, as well as a data usage policy. And below that, in green, are the actual standards. And you'll see here that if we're going to record an address, we should probably be adhering to the United States Postal Addressing Standards. Now, over on the left-hand side, the area in orange, these are the systems. So if I'm looking for address, I can see that address can be found in 3 different systems. Notice that 2 of the systems have padlocks on them, which indicates that the information contained within that system does have some secure elements to it. So what this does is it gives me a perspective of the entire data governance structure as it relates to the cataloging of information. So let's move on from metadata and start to look at actual data. The Data Intelligence Suite supports both previewing and profiling of data assets. In order to preview or profile data, you must have a connection to a data source using the connectors discussed earlier. So first, let's look at data previewing. The Data Intelligence Suite will return a result set from the data source so you can examine the actual data quality to assess its fitness for use. Again, you just have to have a connection to a data source in order to retrieve this information. And as I mentioned before, this can be any number of databases. Now let's take a look at profiling. Data profiling will show a dashboard with statistics over here on the right side. The statistics can be saved as a report and exported in a number of different formats. In addition to qualifying data for use, you'll also want to classify the data as well. Now, data curation has many different definitions depending on who you ask and various factors in various contexts. But for this demonstration, I'm going to refer to data curation as the organization and classification of data elements. So the first thing I want to start with is the business glossary. So the Data Intelligence Suite contains a module called the Business Glossary Manager. And previously we saw a mind map showing the technical and the business side of the data catalog. Well, this is where the business information is documented. On the left-hand side of this catalog view, you can see how the data elements are classified into data domains. Frequently they call this a taxonomy. Classifying business terms helps to organize the information for faster retrieval. There's no limit to the number of classifying catalogs that you can create. But if we look at this, you can see under the catalog of general business terms, we have agreements and orders, finance and accounting, invoicing and payments, and then we can have some subclassifications to invoices and actual payments. And within each one of those catalogs is a series of terms like payment, payment account transaction, payment application. So we can see all that information that we can capture in the Business Glossary Manager. In addition to capturing the business terms, I can also capture my rules, my policies, my standards, and anything else from a business perspective I'd like to capture here. So let's look at some ways that you can actually customize some of these classifiers. The Business Glossary classification categories that we have here can be built to suit your preference. So in addition, there are also 10 generic fields in every business term that can also serve as a classifier. So if we look at this, we have classification, master, reference, derived, transactional. You can customize these by deleting the defaults and adding your own, or just adding your own to this list of existing classifiers. But this is a further way that you can classify and curate your business information. Now let's take a look at this AI match classification. So AI match will find business terms, tables, columns that match together for a certain criteria. So in this example, address is the data element and DIS returned matching tables and columns to associate with address business term. And you can customize this with the settings, the search criteria, the visibility. The slider control will actually determine how closely or how loosely a match is made. Now, once we've classified our information, we're going to want to be able to go search for it. So let's take a look at. So in this section, we're going to discuss some of the filtering and searching capabilities of the Data Intelligence Suite. So the Data Intelligence Suite lets you define filters, and then you can save those filters and you can reuse them. So here's an example of a search filter. All of the different classifications that we just looked at, as far as terms and tags and sensitivity for privacy, can all be customized here, and you can search for information by using these various filters, which can be switched on or off. You can also save a filter so that you can use it over and over again. So across the top here, there's a series of orange boxes, and those boxes are essentially filters that have been previously saved. So I can just run a filter without having to define it each time. Next thing we're going to take a look at is a bit of a summary, and that's the data and analytics integration. So we looked at integration a number of different ways with smart connectors and metadata managers and mapping managers. So what I'd like to do here is to just do a bit of a recap of how those areas fit into the data and analytics integration. So the data connectors, this is the area where you can actually connect to data sources and targets and retrieve information. So the unique thing about this is that we're not limited to just databases here. We can actually look at ETL jobs. We can look at data cubes and analytics software. We can retrieve information from that. So the data connectors are very flexible, and like I mentioned, the Data Intelligence Suite, the engineers, they develop all of the data connectors and service all of the data connectors, so they don't rely on third-party sources to come up with new data connectors. As a matter of fact, if you have a system you want to connect to and there's no data connector available, they will write you a custom connector. Data mapping. So of course this is the way that we look at where the information comes from and where information goes to and how it flows and what are the transformations, which is an important part of integration, so we can understand just exactly what happens to data in its journey. The data dictionary, which is the part of the metadata manager where we actually store all of the metadata, and as I mentioned before, you can store things in system level, environment level, table level, column level, and there's lineage across all of that. And finally, the business glossary, which documents your business vocabulary, as well as documents the policies, the rules, the standards, and anything else that you need to govern your data catalog. So that's the data and analytics integration part. Just as an example to our mapping, you can see here on the left-hand side of this window, it shows all the mappings. In the center is the graphical representation, and over on the right is the metadata catalog where all of this information comes from. So the Data Intelligence Suite is very strong on integrating data from various sources to various targets. Now let's take a look at data access. And when we look at data access here, we're going to look at it from the perspective of data governance. So when governing data, you want to know who has access to data. What roles do they play? Do they need access to that data? What are the responsibilities assigned for those data assets that are being stewarded under governance? So first, let's take a look at the people and the data assets. So here's a bit of a dashboard, and if you look over here on the left-hand side, there's a number of users, actual users of the system. And then in the center here are the metadata assets that they have access to. So this particular person has an access to the loan reporting information, specifically to the risk reporting. They also have access to the customer management system and customer data, the loan system, retail loan data. So they have access to that information. Further over to the right, you can see here that the dashboard shows statistics for the assets that have been assigned, the roles that this particular individual plays, business and technical metadata that they're looking at, as well as what policies that control the access. So we're looking at this from a governance perspective of what are the metadata assets that they are assigned to, what are their access rights in this term. Let's take a look at it another way. Here we're looking at data access rights by role. So if we look here on the far left in the orange oval, we start with the data with the access rights, and here we look at roles with assignments in black as well as roles without assignments. This becomes particularly important when you want to make sure that all the data you have is actually being governed, and do you have roles that you have not actually assigned an individual to. So when we look at this, we can see that there's a business data steward, an operational data steward, and a technical data steward. The business data steward has an assignment, so in green there's an individual that's actually assigned to that role. The metadata environments, the policies, the catalogs, and the rules that that person also has access to. Lastly, we can look by governance responsibility. So this is a bit of a top-down view, and here we can see at the top governance responsibilities. Those are my 3 stewardship areas in blue, and we can see that the business data steward or business data stewardship has at least one person assigned to it, and then the person who's playing that role of business data steward, and again the policies and the rules that are associated with that. So I can look across my entire environment and see the roles, the role players, and the assets, rules, policies, etc. that they're working with. Now we're going to take a look at privacy. So privacy can be documented by flagging metadata according to some privacy level and then assigning the appropriate data access to it. So what we're going to do is look at this data privacy in a glance at a dashboard. So the privacy controls here, if we look at this, you can see over here on the left-hand side, there's a red padlock. Now, if you remember, the red padlock I mentioned in the mind map, that basically flags it as being a sensitive field. So anything that you flag as being sensitive is going to show up on this dashboard. So I have the sensitive metadata listed here on the left. I've got the statistics that will tell me information about that, the classification structure, and the systems that actually contain the classified information. And then down below with the blue hyperlinks, I can get right to any of that metadata that I want to take a look at. So all of this information is available at a glance using the dashboard. The last thing we'll take a look at here is the pricing. The Data Intelligence Suite is divided into modules. The data catalog has mapping and data dictionary capabilities. Data literacy has the business glossary capabilities with a separate read-only interface for business users. The Data Intelligence Suite, which is what we've been looking at, combines the data dictionary, mapping, and business glossary capabilities with a separate read-only interface. So you basically have everything. And at the beginning of this presentation, I talked about Compass, and then Compass contains a lot of the content that you might need to build up your roles, your responsibilities. What are the policies? What are the rules? What are the standards in a package that is delivered in the cloud? So at this point, it concludes this demonstration. So this concludes this demonstration of the Data Intelligence Suite. Thanks for watching.